Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm super happy to be here for so very many reasons. One of them is that I'm freakishly passionate about having technology empower all of our efforts, and particularly if there is a way for us to come to a level of understanding about what would be available for our entire community if we really take on what technology offers today. At my office at CARD, we took on technology quite a while ago, despite not having a budget for it and all of that, and certainly using social media to put the word out. So throughout my time today, I'll be threading some of the practical pieces plus the things that were sort of the unexpected benefits of having taken it on. By a quick show of hands, how many of you right now feel that you have a really good grasp of current technology and you feel empowered by it? And please, brutal honesty, raise your hand. And you will notice there was not this mad whoosh of hands going up. Why do you think that is? Yes, why?
I would say everyone in the younger generation lives with it. The older generation is terrified.
Awesome. The younger generation, they live with it. Older generation, not so much. And the truth is that younger people, especially people in their 30s, 20s, teens, they are what is referred to as digital natives, right? They grew up with technology being normal. They never experienced the world without computers. They can text behind their backs. They don't actually have to look at their phones while they're doing anything. And they can actually do several things at once. They can talk to you, they can text, and they don't have to break stride while drinking coffee, right? So they're literally doing it like this. And some of us, and I won't point any fingers, literally have to put all of our energy to getting a text out because it's that level of difference. So what I am going to be showing is really about understanding all of that and understanding there's still something really incredible to be had if we take it on. I'll tell you a little bit about CARD so you know why we became so passionate about this. How many of you remember the Loma Prieta earthquake? Raise your hand, please. Awesome. Loma Prieta earthquake interrupted the World Series, therefore it became a worldwide event, and that's really what put the whole nonprofit preparedness movement on a national scale. What we saw was that here we were in the Bay Area, one of the most diverse areas of the country. I mean, how long had we known we were diverse? How long? Forever. Our history is diversity. How long had we known we were going to have an earthquake? Exactly. Yet we fell on our collective faces and we had nothing in place to serve people with disabilities. And it wasn't just people with disabilities, we also had nothing in place to serve people who didn't speak English, we had nothing in place to serve people who did not have the financial resources to do what they were told. CARD was created very specifically to fill that gap and to look at how do we make preparedness, response, recovery, and that entire conversation work for nonprofits, faith agencies, and others whose entire mission is to serve people with different needs. What we've ultimately come to is that preparedness is a topic that's really hard for people to embrace no matter how you frame it, but the most important thing in the success is framing it away from the disasters and putting it squarely in what will help agencies every day, what will help them build their missions, what will help them build their bank accounts. Really, the conversation isn't prepare for disasters, the conversation is prepare to prosper. What we've looked at also is how people are labeled, and in that labeling, people get pigeonholed and not really spoken to in the appropriate ways, and certainly without the level of empowerment that people need. This is just some of the labeled groups, and I'll tell you, even the way that government chooses to label groups has changed significantly. How many of you remember when anyone with a disability was considered special needs? How many of you remember that phrase? How about hard to reach? How the list of different ways you can group people never ends. And the truth is, every group has different needs. Every single group. You cannot pick a group and not find something that makes them unique in terms of their needs or preparedness. But what I want to really show is that if you look really across the diverse spectrum of our community, everyone benefits from technology, whether directly or indirectly. There are people who have never ever touched a computer, never touched a cell phone, but their lives today are very much supported by technology, whether it's the technology that a caregiver carries, whether it's the technology that their service providers use. Technology is actually everywhere. It's a matter of the degree to which we are willing to embrace it and make it serve our needs. I'm not going to ask you to share this out loud, but I would like you to consider this in your heads. Related to truly embracing technology as a way of empowering our outreach and our resilience, where are you? This is your standard curve. There's always people who consider themselves the innovators. They're the ones who will jump on board. They like it. They're willing to actually go through that beta testing stage where things don't quite work, but it's new and it's cool and they're ready to jump on it. Other people have friends who are like that, and they will wait until a friend says, okay, this is cool, then they will jump on. And then you see it goes all the way toward the right side of the screen. And then there are those who are the laggards, right? They're not particularly interested in this. They will hold back for all it's worth until they're actually forced into it. And then if you get to the extreme, they're the ones who, even when they're forced, they're going to complain and whine all the way through. How many of you know at least one person who falls into that category? Be honest, come on. But here's the thing. Those are the people who are the vocal resistance. They're also known as cave dwellers, consistently against virtually everything. There are some people, and you know who they are going to be unhappy with technology, they're going to be unhappy with change, they're going to say it won't work, and they will still want to wait for something. And the truth is, if you are looking for your community to benefit the most, you will shove yourself all the way to the other end. Because innovators and early adopters derive the most benefit from whatever the innovation is. How many of you are on some form of social media, like Facebook or LinkedIn? Awesome. Now let's see just the LinkedIn people. Raise your hand if you're on LinkedIn. Awesome. LinkedIn is the #1 business networking site in the world. It has the highest economic demographic of all the social media sites, and LinkedIn is the #1 place where employers and funders and a whole bunch of other decision makers look for partnerships. It is one of those sites that if you are on it, you can make it work for you. I jumped on LinkedIn fairly early in its existence, and they actually sent out a note to everyone who was in the first million people who joined. So I got a note saying, congratulations for being an early adopter, woo, you know. And here's the thing that came out of just being one of the people at the front end. My network continues to grow whether or not I ever link with another person. Because every person I link to links to someone else and to someone else and to someone else. So even if I do nothing, if I never ever change my profile again, if I never go on, I never do anything, my network has continued to grow, and we still get referrals from people I linked to once when I first started. So honestly, if you're looking at how do we make the greatest impact for the communities we're committed to serving, you will go from wherever you are on this and go as far as you can sustainably into that world of championing it. And even if you don't want to embrace it for yourself, the one thing I'm imploring you to do is to leave the vocal resistance at home. Because honestly, all it takes is one powerful vocal resistor at a meeting to have an issue be tabled. How many of you have been to a meeting and because someone made a big issue over something, no resolution happened and it dragged on forever? Raise your hand high. Yes, you know what this looks like. And I can tell you we have lots of partners who the whole reason they were not able to embrace technology or social media or any of the other things was just because a couple of the vocal resistance made an issue out of it. So let's look. If you look at preparedness or just building your resilience or just doing your outreach, all signs lead to technology and social media. You really can't think of any major advancement in any of the issues that we care about where social media and or technology isn't part of how it's moved forward these days. So let's just look at a few of the things. So for example, this is low tech, right? This is basically a potty poster. At CARD we have this whole series of things called potty poster, and all it is the most low tech thing you can possibly imagine. It's a poster you put up in restrooms. right? Because the truth is, people will read anything you put on a restroom stall door. This is a human nature truth. There is no sense in fighting it. If I put a poster up in the bathroom, you will read it. If I wrote smut on the wall, you will read it and come out and complain about the smut. The truth is that people will read what's in front of them. So this is low tech, but the high tech equivalency is to actually take the information of what is good for safety and giving people phone numbers to put inside their cell phones. And by the way, how many of you are carrying a cell phone today? Raise your hand. Is there anyone here who does not have a cell phone and is never planning on getting one? Okay, not one hand goes up. The reality is, and honestly, if I could do this, I would. If I could, I'd lock us all in this room and we would not get out until everyone had their phones programmed appropriately. And by programmed appropriately, I don't just mean safety numbers, I mean the things that will help you in your outreach and resilience. For example, if I ruled the world, and I have not yet gotten there, but give me time, all of you would be programmed into each other's phones. You would be in a group, so that if we needed to get a message out, I'd click one button and all of you get notified. How many of you can see the value of that even before I explain it? Right? Just one message and all of you getting it. I want you to think of what that would do for your advocacy. What would it mean when something comes up and everyone who cares about this topic got notified that fast? It would change how advocacy is done. And by the way, elected officials care tremendously about how connected their constituents are. They are more responsive to connected constituents. I want you to picture what would happen the next time an elected official did something that did not serve the developmentally disabled community, and if they had 500 people all popping up on their Facebook saying, what? I mean, literally, you don't even have to be really, really versed in the issue. Imagine what that would look like if you're that supervisor, you're that council member, you've said or done something that in some way does not further what you're interested in, and bam, you sent that out, and 500 people who care are like, what's the meaning of this? How quickly do you think that elected official would address the issue? How quickly?
Very quickly.
That's what they're much more responsive to today than ever before. Similarly, if an elected official does something to support developmentally disabled people, what's one thing we could all do? Awesome. How do you think it would play out? Now picture what it looks like on Facebook. They sign some bill, they champion something, they come to a meeting, they keynote, they do something that allows their level of power to support your cause. What would it look like to have 500 people saying thank you and cross-posting it? Do you think they would pay attention to you? Do you think other politicians who are connected to those politicians would pay attention to you? You could change the world by your level of connectivity and your willingness to use your phone. So this is why when people talk about, oh no, I'm old school, I don't want blah, blah, blah. I'm fine if you want to personally have no technology in your life. Right? If you want to remain unconnected, that's your business. But if you're in the world of being an advocate, one of the most powerful tools you've got is your willingness to have your phone serve your needs. How many of you can see the difference if we just took on phone programming? Nothing else, just the phone. Yeah, you could change the world with what you've got in your phone. Ditto for your staff and volunteers. All of you who work in an office or volunteer for an agency, I'd like you to consider what it would mean if you did that with your staff. This is an example of how you can program anyone's phone number based on whatever service they use. So for example, I'm a Sprint user. You can take my phone number, and if you know that I'm a Sprint user, turn that into just a text message or an email, and you'd be able to reach me from any computer. So even if you have no technology, you're not into cell phones, you could from your computer text me. It's a very simple thing to do, but I'd like you to consider if every agency that serves developmentally disabled residents, what would happen if they were that connected just with their own staff and volunteers? Just think of the numbers. I don't know how many agencies we have in Alameda County who consider themselves to be actively serving the developmentally disabled community. Sandy, do you have any idea how many inside Alameda County?
I know there are 600 between between Contra Costa and Alameda County. Jim or Ronke, do you have any idea?
That's a good enough number. If we've got 600 agencies, if all of them just did a little of this, imagine what that would mean for your power in getting a message out, for getting that level of advocacy, for getting that level of support. And I'm going to repeat this theme because I can't even tell you with enough force how differently your world would look if you had that level of power in your own community, to mobilize your assets that quickly and to have that many voices speaking up on your behalf. And all of this, by the way, is all written out on eHow. How many of you are familiar with eHow?
Never heard of it.
Yeah, eHow is a site where you can go, and it's like, if you're wondering, how do I do that? Just go to eHow and type in, how do I do this programming of cell phone magicness, and it'll just walk you through it. Now let's get down to some of the outreach. How many of you use Facebook?
We even have a page here.
Excellent. And how many likes do you have? How many people are connected to your page?
The current status for the council is 102.
102 people have liked the council. Now, here is what I want, and I'm willing to help you do this. I want to see that number be 500.
So
What?
would I.
Excellent. Now, Herb and I are on board with this. If you were going to take on getting the council's Facebook page to have 500 people, what do you think the easiest way to do it would be?
I'm gonna talk too much. Use the telephone, which I have right there, which is attached to the page, and start posting every night, is what I do already. But I would suggest it to all your friends that are already on the page, that have liked of the 102, keep sharing and keep duplicating the share to other people. Tell your friends you have listed already.
Excellent. That's one way. What's another way to just bump up the number so that everybody, personally, I think everybody should know about your Facebook page. Everybody. Every elected official, every funder, every person who says they care about developmentally disabled people. What? What?
Them to like the page.
Yeah, there's a magic little button inside Facebook where you can go, and after you've liked the page, you can invite your friends to like that page. And I would argue that if we got a handful of the 600 agencies to do that, and everybody is doing it, what you would have is this rapid increase in numbers. And numbers actually will matter. It will matter to funders, it matters to elected officials, it matters to many people. The other thing is, for everyone here, to find one thing to post, just one. I'm not asking you to become social media wizards. I'm merely saying if everyone here, next time you're online, if you see something that in some way either supports people with developmental disabilities or supports the cause or in some way shares a success story, share it. Send the link, post it. Have your page just be absolutely filled with wonderful bits of research and positive stories and lots, let me underscore the lots of beautiful pictures. Lots. How many? Lots. Why do you think pictures matter? Nice amount.
People are visual.
Most people, highly visual, most of what we remember in the world comes from stimulation of the visual cortex. So you could put little pithy, happy messages up there, but if you put the same pithy message with a nice photo, people will look at it, people will click on it, people will read it. So I highly recommend getting zealous, freaky zealous about pictures. I want to see pictures of all of the agencies that are here. How many of you have been out to the Alacosta Center? We love Alacosta, by the way. Beautiful pictures of the center, what they do, telling a fabulous story. I mean, all of that. Success stories, all of it. Do you think we could get to 500? How many of you are willing to do at least one simple step to help get to 500?
You don't need to count me.
Awesome. For all of you who didn't raise your hand, I'm a little hurt, but that's okay. But the reality is that the two main sites that I'm going to be recommending, actually it's sort of three, it is Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Facebook because it's the largest, Facebook because it's the easiest, and in fact, if I were going to take over the world of emergency management and make things easy for people, I would never make another emergency management site. I'd make every site look like Facebook. Because then you could stop a random 12-year-old on the street, and that 12-year-old would be able to manage the page. Do you think a 12-year-old can manage a Facebook page? Yes, because they do. They do, and they do it faster and easier than many of us. I would actually have to pay attention to what I'm clicking. A 12-year-old does not, right? And this is just the truth. I am too old for these things to just be native to me. And while I'm quite competent at Facebook after this point, if a new social media site opens up tomorrow, I'd actually have to pay attention. A 12-year-old does not, right? It is natural for them. They don't actually think the same way we think. I think like an old person. I learned to type on a typewriter, and I learned to type on a manual typewriter. So for me, nothing digital is absolutely intuitive, right? That's just a factor of age. But for young people, and by the way, how important will it be to get young people engaged in the developmental disability cause? How? On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it to get young people to be your advocates?
Very.
I would say it's an 11. It is more important than I can tell you. And if you are not using the tools that young people use, you are not helping them to be part of the conversation, right? If you're not reaching them where they live, they're not going to jump over mountains to get to where you are. So the truth is, if we want young people to support this, to understand this, to grow up literally being part of this conversation, volunteering, being supportive, being sensitive, all of those good words, we absolutely have to frame our dialogue and put it on the platforms where they live. And right now, if you want to reach kids, you're going to be doing things like making sure that it's available for Instagram and Facebook and all of those things. But it's too much to try to take on every social media site. If you could master Facebook, you will be getting into many of the major sites. I mentioned LinkedIn earlier. I highly recommend, as people who care, if you do nothing else, go on, create a reasonable profile. And by reasonable profile, I mean put a non-ugly picture up and answer some of the questions. I'm not saying you have to get wild and freaky and crazy about it. I'm just saying that you need to be reachable and connectable. Just reachable and connectable. Because if people have to search their email and call a friend to find out, well, who is it who's head of this disability? No. People are lazy. How many of you is this news? How many of you know people are lazy? Awesome. But here's the truth. You need to be easy to find. You just do. If your signature file doesn't make it clear where you are, it's harder to find you. I have people in my life who have missed out on opportunities because I'm a busy person. If someone asks me for a referral, I do one thing right away. I pick up my phone, I go to my Gmail, and I look them up. If their email has their contact information in their signature file, I am exponentially more able to be helpful to them. If you make me do 2 or 3 other steps to find you and find your email and find your phone number, I don't have time for that. I just don't. So if you want to support the cause, if you want people to be able to find you easily, put yourself, even if all you're doing is putting your contact information. Now, Sandy does use social media. If Sandy chose personally, I hate this thing, I don't want to know this thing, because of her commitment to this, she could still go online, put Sandy Soliday, her title, the contact information that is public, right? I'm not asking Sandy to divulge anything personal about herself. I am saying she should still be easily findable. I mean easily. I should pop in her name and be able to go, oh, that's where she is on LinkedIn, or that's where she is on Facebook. She can choose to keep as private as she would like, but for the sake of our connectivity, we need that. Yes?
How do you get people to not be so afraid, because, I'm in Israel, got stranded, can you send me $500 because you didn't have it? So how do you get people to that's the first thing when you get the people all the way to the right saying, I'm not doing that because, all of a sudden I got hacked and, and then things, and that takes you to a whole different,
There are a couple of things we say, and this is in one of the classes we have for Facebook for seniors and people with disabilities. It's a really big issue that people understand the security end of social media. So there are a few things. Number one, when you sign up on these sites, I think it's a great idea to use an email address that isn't your main email address, right? So even if you're not gonna make it public, make it so that it's an extra step to actually getting to you, but you can use, for example, Gmail. How many of you have a Gmail account? Awesome. Gmail is ridiculously awesome for a host of reasons, but if you go to Google and pick a Gmail account, you could use that as your back end for any of these. So when you sign up for any site, you use Gmail. You have Gmail forward anything that comes from the site to your real site, right? So your real email address. So now you've put a level of separation. But also, this is a matter of, one, just being a more savvy person. Don't put things online that you wouldn't want a stranger to be able to find. That's just the way it is. So for example, you will never, ever hear of a scandal of me posting naked pictures. How do I know this? Because I'm never gonna post a naked picture. It's not gonna be there. There's not gonna be a, oh, her site got hacked. No, it's not gonna happen. I screen myself for being online, and then for all of those scams, and there are tons of scams. The newest scam is the kidnapping scam, the virtual kidnap scam. I was listening to it this morning. It's where people call you and they say, we have kidnapped your loved one. Right now, I need you to, and they basically tell you to send them money. Don't hang up the phone, get on your computer, send $2,000 or your loved one dies. And you hear screaming and all this in the background. Yeah, it's a hideous thing, but the reality is that you will not stop scam artists by just not being on Facebook. You have to be able to avoid people who do this. So how many of you have ever gotten one of those scams? Anybody here? Yeah, and you get them via email, you get them in all sorts of ways. The thing is, and this is where being super connected to people matters, I got one of those emails that said, oh, hi, I'm writing this with tears in my eyes, I went on vacation, somebody has stolen all of my money, please send me money, right? And it looks as if it's coming from them because they hacked the site. I texted that person, who of course was not in that foreign country, they were not, none of that. Having multiple ways to communicate with people matters. The last time I got one of those, it was from someone who I was only connected to by Facebook, so I didn't have their email address and all that, it was just a Facebook connection. I went over and I searched for them on LinkedIn, found them through LinkedIn, and communicated that way. So I had multiple ways to find out, yay or nay, is this a scam? But the other thing is, don't fall prey to scams in the same way that you do it for everything else. So security, big issue, and in every class for people, that should be part of it. Does that help answer some of the questions? Awesome. The other thing I'm going to point out is YouTube. YouTube is unbelievable for getting your message out. I'm so happy to hear you guys have got a YouTube channel. What's going to help you have a great YouTube channel? Because first of all, anybody can put up a YouTube channel. How do you get a good YouTube channel?
You tell us, Anna Marie.
No, I want to see the people in the room first. I know what I know already. I don't know what you know. Okay, but
I can get Doctor Who and Star Trek.
so you can connect it to some of the good things. The best way for you to make your YouTube channel great is by having people go connect and like to it so people can find it easily, because you could put up the greatest information in the world and if no one finds it, it'll just sit there, right? But you actually promote it. If you link to Card, what you will see on our Facebook page, on all these different things, you will see that we will link back to our videos on YouTube. And it's not that we've done a lot of videos on YouTube, it's that we took the time to promote some of them. Some of you may remember my former assistant, Marianne. Marianne has cerebral palsy, and so we did a video of her, a preparedness video, and it's called What's Up Your Crutch, right? Because Marianne uses 2 armband crutches, and when you pull the head off her crutch, what you see inside her crutch tubes are whistles and flashlights and all sorts of safety stuff, right? Both crutch tubes have tons of safety stuff in it. So normally, someone who would look at Marianne would assume she's a more vulnerable person in a room. She's petite, she's a woman, she's got a disability, so people would just label her as vulnerable. By the time you are done with that 5 minutes of YouTube, you realize holy moly, Marianne is easily the more prepared person in any room. And she also knows how to use her crutches to beat you to death. So she is the exact opposite of what people would project on her. There is no way that I could write that or express that would get the message across as powerfully as 5 minutes in a video. That one 5-minute video, which I think has, I don't know, like 15,000 views now or something, got her invitations to speak at conferences, it's gotten her invitations for jobs, it has gotten all kinds of publicity about, and people writing to us and contacting us to say it changed their idea of what preparedness and people with disabilities should look like. 5 minutes. I could not have done that with all the nice research papers. I mean, I write papers, I like research papers are all good, but a 5-minute video changed people's opinion that fast. Because also, not only do you see what she's got in her crutch tubes, she carries a very small purse because she needs her hands free for her crutches. So in her tiny little itty bitty purse, which could literally fit 3 times inside my purse, she's got all sorts of other little things like a programmed phone and a whistle and a flashlight and all these different things. And it really is just like, wow, that's a very different way to look at this. So the more you can put those sort of mind-changing things on your page, the better off we all will be. And a simple thing to do is do little clip promos. I mean, honestly, you could take your cell phone and get someone to just say 2 or 3 minutes about why you're part of the council and post it. You know, a lot of people never think to join a council, never think to step up, never think to serve in this manner. So to see your faces saying, this is why. And I know some of you have incredibly compelling stories as to why you chose to be part of this council. Some of you did it for personal reasons, some for professional, but whatever the reason, the more people see people like themselves finding this to be a worthy endeavor, the easier it is to make the case for, let's say, everything. Absolutely everything is easier once you get that level of buy-in. That make sense? Awesome. The other sort of online pieces I think are important, but they're not nearly as important as you embracing the Facebook, YouTube. Whoa. Okay. I touched the screen. There we go. I am not used to this being a touch screen.
It's touchy too.
It's a touchy little touch screen. But the reality is that these other things, Twitter, how many of you are involved with Twitter? You use Twitter? Yeah, Twitter is not my most favorite, but here's the secret that we learned because it makes people believe I'm good at Twitter. I have my Facebook page, Card's Facebook page, has an auto forward to Card's Twitter site. So whenever I post on Facebook, it immediately posts a shortened link of it onto Twitter, which means people think I'm on Twitter. I spend very little time on Twitter. Twitter is great in an emergency. It is absolutely phenomenally wonderful in an emergency because it's right there, it's immediate, you can't get much faster than the people who are actually on site tweeting about it. So it is fabulous post-disaster. It's excellent for people with short attention spans because the message is only 140 characters. It's also excellent if you are not a good writer or if you don't perceive yourself to be a good writer because it's 2 sentences, 2. That means you can't get fancy, you don't worry about all sorts of other things. You basically can post a sentence and a picture, right? Look at this, bam, and a picture is a perfectly valid Twitter post. Hootsuite, the reason I point out Hootsuite is for the people who are very much afraid of social media. They're the ones who are afraid of, oh, I can't deal with Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and blah, blah, blah. Hootsuite lets you manage all of them from one place. So you only have to learn one interface, and you could, so if I wanted to, I could pull up Hootsuite and post a message and then choose, I'm gonna post this on my LinkedIn and on my Facebook and on my Twitter. So I have a Hootsuite account that has all of my personal accounts and all of Card's accounts listed. So right now, if I wanted to post to my personal Facebook, Card's Facebook, my Twitter, Card's Twitter, LinkedIn, all of these things, I can do it from one place all at once. So it just makes your life easier. I will mention Flickr. How many of you use Flickr?
Never heard of it.
Almost no one? Yeah, Flickr is a online photo repository. So if you have lots of pictures that you would like to share publicly with the world, it's a place to do it. The reason I mentioned Flickr is because it would be incredibly awesome to have beautiful pictures of developmentally disabled people, the different companies that serve them, and all of that, so that when people do a search, when news folks are doing a search, and they go online and they're gonna do something about people with developmental disabilities, they will type in developmental disabilities, your picture should pop up. Can everybody see the value that that would have for a media outlet when they're gonna do a story, for them to get an easy, quickie, lots of nice looking pictures? And besides, if you don't put nice looking pictures out there, what does get chosen? Ugly pictures. Pictures you wouldn't want, old pictures from 20 years ago. You want the modern, real face of your cause and the people you love to be represented out in the world. And if you're not putting it up there, they're pulling it from somewhere else. And honestly, if I could, I would make you all go home right now and find pictures and label them and then go post them up online so that the world can see what you're doing and they would really be able to see it in real time in the places where they're looking. And WordPress, of course, is the easy way to put up a blog. And I'm not even gonna go into blogging because that's even deeper than this, but just any of this. But if you're gonna pick one, which one do you think I'm gonna tell you to pick? What's the second? Third? Awesome, thank you. Now, other parts of technology, it's really about using all technology. We've got this tiny little laptop here that also happens to be a touch screen. You all have variations of phones, and I want to show you this is what it actually looked like when CARD was working with the city of Oakland during Occupy, right? When Occupy Oakland was going on, CARD was brought in to be the on-site person to really address, okay, well, what's going to happen if an agency that serves frail seniors is caught up in the middle of a march, a protest? How are we even going to know that that's happening? You know, it's that sort of thing. So CARD serves as the point person inside the Office of Emergency Services. The Oakland Office of Emergency Services does not have an overabundance of computers and technology and all sorts of things. So CARD would always bring in our own stuff. What you will see is that is my teeny tiny version of this type of computer. This is my iPad, and then my cell phone was right next to it. So I could literally walk into the Office of Emergency Services, whether or not they had a desk for me, whether or not they had a computer hookup for me, I was able to do my job. And I would just argue that if you start making your office that mobile, you would be able to be who you are and champion your cause anywhere you are. Because if I had waited for the city to get the space all worked out and the connectivity all worked out, we would have been exponentially less effective. We were able to go in, and by the way, because I had cell phone, which was on the Sprint network, I had an iPad that was on the AT&T network, and I had a laptop that we could plug in to whatever system they were using. I was the only person who had connectivity the entire time. Because at some point each one of the connections failed. I was the only one who had access to different networks because we purposely chose to have different network connectivity. So just when you're making choices, I would ask you to consider what it would mean to you to be that mobile, that connected, that able to do your job no matter where you are, and to empower people to do the same. Then you can look at the world of apps. How many of you have a favorite app on your smartphone right now? Raise your hand if you've got an app you love. What's an app you love?
My Fitbit app.
Fitbit app, yeah. Fitbit apps are fabulous. Yep, Sally, Sandy?
What's app?
An application. That's one of those things you download.
No,
and-
no. I have that application, WhatsApp.
Ah, excellent.
Good trick question.
I was a little concerned.
So is that.
Would you tell us a little about WhatsApp?
Yes, I have a daughter who lives in Africa, and because I've not been real smart about, I pick up the phone when I want to talk to her, and it's somewhat costly. I finally downloaded WhatsApp, and we can text for free. And I don't keep a text plan on because I don't text that much, so I don't keep it on my phone, but it's free. So
So texting for
What's that?
free when you don't have a text plan on your phone. Yeah, I mean, that's a kind of remarkable and fabulous thing, right? Anybody else have an app you just love? Yes?
Out of the Facebook page, I use the 511 for transit.
511, the transit app, so you can find every single way to get from point A to point B. You can know where all the traffic delays are and all of that. Anybody else have an app you just love?
Yelp.
Yelp. Excellent. Anybody else? I am wild for my GPS app. I honestly don't remember what life was like before I had GPS on my phone because I have no directional competence whatsoever. It's a miracle I make it home by myself every night. My GPS gets me everywhere. The fact that I have a parking app allows me to park and not have cash, and in a little while my phone will beep and remind me that I need to up how much money is in the meter. I mean, all of these things have changed people's lives. But if you look at preparedness apps, I'd like you to consider what would happen if, along with embracing technology, we embraced people downloading apps and actually making that part of the meetings that you're in. If there is Wi-Fi available, what would it mean for people to walk around with the first aid app and just the apps that will make it so that if something happens, you just get to go, whoop, just a minute here, and you pull up the app and you could be the hero because you happen to have an app on your phone. How many of you have the flashlight app on your phone? Awesome. This is a very simple thing. Every single time you're in a meeting, spend 60 seconds getting people to download something helpful. And here's the thing, if you download something helpful, the chances that you're gonna go home and go, ooh, let me get that helpful thing off my phone is really low, right? If you help them download it, they will have it with them. And it just makes a difference. I use my flashlight app all the time. I use the voice recorder on this all the time. Get a good idea, the chances that I'm gonna remember to go and write it down, slim to none. But I can just push the button, make it work for me. And for people who have less ability to do it for themselves, this is one of the greatest, and I do mean greatest intergenerational programs you can possibly do. Have a young person who can do this stuff in their sleep help someone who can't, right? Put the young people to work, I say, and put them to work now. It's true. They're young, they will get over it, and they should. Can you tell I'm old and cranky today? But the reality is that this is something that young people really do with great ease and absolutely none of the upset and breakdown. For me, and I'm fairly technically savvy, I still get to a point where if I don't know what I'm doing, I have to go to my colleague Lars Eric, who is fabulous and he's a tech guy, and I basically go, and I hand it to him. Because I just reach a point where I know my level of knowledge has been exceeded. And so I don't try to become a tech whiz, but I try to maintain a high level of tech savviness. I'm asking you to find your level and get up to it. A couple of apps that will be helpful for all of you, and this goes back to what I said earlier about if I could, I would make you all connect with each other. GroupMe is an app that allows you to do that thing I was talking about, where you send one message, every single person gets it, and then you can actually see the string, you can see people by name, so you don't have to wonder who did this mystery text come from. How many of you have ever gotten a mystery text, right? It just arrives and you're like, what the heck is this? Who's asking, you know? GroupMe stops all that, and you can do different groups. You can do the whole disability council, you can do your electives, you can do any number of different things. Dropbox, how many of you use Dropbox? Awesome. One of the things we need to break away from technologically is trying to send people a bazillion files. It is just hard for people, it gets overwhelming. Creating a public space where you can drop all your information, all your handouts, all of your whatever, so that people can actually just download it onto their devices, super helpful. 1Password, how many of you have ever forgotten a password? If you were being honest, every hand would go up, but the truth is, 1Password allows you one password. You make one password, it lets you enter into that particular app, and then you put all of your other passwords in there, and it's super encrypted, it doesn't get cracked, and it has all sorts of security features, but if you can manage to remember one password, you can safely store all of your passwords.
I have a question.
Sure.
iPhone has it. Is that the same?
It's not the exact same app, but yes, you can download. I do have an iPhone, and I use 1Password on my iPhone.
Okay.
And I can show it to you later.
Yeah, right.
Excellent. First aid app. I think everybody should just have a first aid app. If you're there, something happens, whip out your first aid app. And there are lots of them, and they do them differently. Some people need more visuals, some people need more interaction, but have a first aid app. Finding a health center. And again, these are things that if you did them at the agencies where people are service providers, everybody should be able to easily connect to where they get their health addressed. Police scanner, finding out what's going on around you. Makes total sense to know what is happening, especially because we're not connected to TV 24/7. You've got your phone with you all the time. So if something happens, being able to just hear it, unbelievably helpful. Recorder HD. I don't know how if you tape meetings other than this lovely videotape you're doing now, but easy apps for just hearing it. For those of you who are truly zealous and geeky and want to be in the world of really nerdy emergency management, you can download the National Incident Management System Incident Command System Guide. I don't see a lot of takers for that, but I'm just saying that some of you may want to know that level of nerddom about preparedness and response. Also, just doing signage. How many of you have ever gone to a meeting and they didn't have appropriate signage? Really, if we all just took on, we can easily do signage. You can make that work. There are things that do banner signs. So when I have my iPad, if we go to a meeting and there isn't proper signage, we actually program it in. And you can do one where you can actually give instructions. So I could just have it on repeated loop. Go to the right and you will see the blah, blah, blah. Go to the, and so some human doesn't have to stand there, but you're actually seeing it and hearing it. Certainly more CPR, more medical things. Oh, megaphone. The ability to make your voice heard. I have a loud voice, so it's not a problem for me, but some people, they really don't have that. So just...
That's right. That's me. I'm the same way. My voice getting loud.
Excellent. See, some of us do not need a microphone or a megaphone, but how many of you have been to a meeting where honestly every time someone spoke, you could not hear them? And it slows down the meeting, and it actually makes it harder for that person to contribute. So if we can help people use their technology so that they can better contribute, it changes things. Nixle. How many of you have signed up for Nixle?
What is it?
Awesome. Nixle is a system that most of our emergency management groups use, and you can sign up based on your zip code or a community that you're interested in, and you will get little blasts on your phone, little text telling you there's been a police action or something. Yep.
I just want to point out, I think this is a particularly helpful app. Lori Katsanas with East Bay Innovations, the Director of Employment, she gets the alerts. So we've had incidences here in downtown Oakland with Occupy Oakland, and there was a shooting about a year ago, etc. And she's able to look out for her staff and the consumers that receive their services through that. I think it's particularly helpful for service providers that have mobile units.
I think it is helpful for every service provider, every business, and I don't care what business it is. I think it's more important for people who have more vulnerable constituent base. But if I owned a restaurant, I would make sure that all of my staff had this because it's super helpful to know that a gunman is on the loose and on your block. Right? You shouldn't find out by him coming through the door. If you can get a heads up, awesome. The same is true when they see a protest coming. If there's been a big accident, they just put it out and you get it on your phone. So this is one of those apps that the next time you have a staff meeting, if you can have everybody download it and then pick your area, just do it. You can turn off the alerts if you don't want it. Yep.
You know something else is very good too. I just found out on the newscast that you cannot, now you could look up, you cannot.
Yep.
And if someone is missing or a child is missing, they give you a alert. They let you know the person is missing.
Absolutely. It's
That's
the
new thing now. They didn't ever do that before. That's the new thing now.
yeah. There are Amber alerts you can get on your phone. Yep.
Speaking of, you led me right into it. Had to do with the Amber Alert. As of yesterday morning, Facebook is now nationally doing this for the Amber Alert, so that any local area So if you do get on Facebook, you'll get the notice in
Oh,
there.
that's right, I forgot about that. That's
Yeah.
what
Just
I'm
started
doing.
yesterday morning.
Yep.
Something else I did want to mention, want to give information about the protest, which
Yes.
I found out was one starting later today at 4 o'clock, and I need to go home.
Yes, and I would say this is one of the most important reasons to use your phone or whatever technology. It doesn't have to be your phone, you can have it programmed with your iPad, whatever, to be that level of connected. It matters. When we had, how many of you remember the smell of gas evacuation? Do you remember that a few weeks back?
Where?
In downtown Oakland, many buildings evacuated, but it turned out there was this mystery smell. People thought it was gas. PG&E said it wasn't gas. It was just some weird smell that nobody can describe. But anyway, buildings were evacuated. This is incredibly important if you have accessoride or you're waiting for a van to pick you up or a parent to pick you up or a guardian to pick. This is incredibly important. People should know. You should not just wind up standing on a street corner and you have no idea what's going on. So it's that level of knowledge about what's happening. Skype, for some people, best communication is going to happen when they can actually see you. Period, end of report. So Skype is that. And it, again, it's an easy thing, but it matters sometimes to be face-to-face. A second phone line, right? You can download an app that actually acts as a second phone line, phone number that is programmable and switchable to other places. We mentioned 511 Transit, that's an excellent app to have. The weather bug. How many of you have ever been caught unprepared by the weather? Yeah, this is an easy one. Get alerts when a sudden storm is coming, flash flooding, any of those things. One of my favorites for doing disaster exercises is the Siren app. You can actually make the Siren app so that if you're doing any sort of drill, any sort of exercise, you can actually make it more realistic. And by the way, making drills and exercises more realistic matters for every good reason. If people don't perceive the same level of basically the biological response to noises and things. How many of you know you're noise sensitive? See, if I'm doing a disaster exercise, if I actually hear police sirens, it changes how you respond. So you can actually make your drills and exercises more realistic. Here's one I think I would like everybody to have, is a translator. Anybody here ever try to communicate with someone and you don't speak their language? Yes. You should have a little app so that if you want to render assistance, so everybody at my office has a translator app. So that way if they're out in the community and someone comes up to them and it's a language they don't speak, they can pull open the app and still be able to help people who don't speak the same language. Super helpful. Flipboard. For those of you who really, really do not want to go surfing the entire web trying to figure out what's useful and what's not, Flipboard allows you to pick the different sites that you like. So for example, if all I care about is developmental disabilities, I could pick on my Flipboard and program every Facebook page that relates to a developmentally disabled disability organization and every feed that is related to it. So literally, I would be flipping through a magazine that looks as if it's nothing but information about the developmentally disabled community. And so just being able to customize easily how all your news comes to you changes your willingness to actually look for news and participate in the news. So all we're trying to do here is get people to be better at being good consumers of news and being able to put the news out there, get your name out there, reach out to a community. The more we unite this community and make it easy for people to share, everything gets easier. And I mean everything. There is no aspect of your job that won't be supported by having that level of connectivity. My question is, I just gave you lots of information about technology and outreach, and I realized it was a lot and fairly fast. But out of all the things we just shared, I'd like to ask you to just turn to a neighbor and say, what's one thing that you can do to really forward this conversation? Because how many of you are agreeing that embracing technology will help your outreach and resilience? How many of you? Awesome. For those who didn't raise your hand, I'm still a little hurt. Just but please, turn to your neighbor and just say one thing you can do to forward this conversation.
Sign up Facebook. Everybody.
personal. I think I need to do a business page. Well, I'm on LinkedIn already. I think to do some page just a business page. It doesn't have my family pictures on it. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I double.
Please complete the conversation. And we have a question over here, yes?
I do not understand. I have a phone trying to tell me about the Facebook. Do you have anything about the Facebook up there?
Yes.
Yes, we
Because
talked.
I have a lot of confusion and not understand about Facebook. I cannot trust the Facebook, and I cannot trust the Facebook, and I don't understand about the Facebook because they told me put a picture in the Facebook. I don't believe that because I don't want to. They look me up. I look for them.
And no worries, for some people, if you don't trust it, I'm not saying every single person should do it, but if you want to learn more and really address some of those concerns, rather than going on Facebook, go on YouTube and look up about Facebook, and then you will find out lots of things about the safety. But if you're not feeling safe about it, by all means, just don't do it. Yes?
I've got another one. All these apps, the things that scare me, and of course I've been worried about it, are all the ones you listed. There's two ways. The one is some of those they charge you a service fee per month, and the other one is a third-party links. All of a sudden you get 500 more. Are any of those,
Yep.
all these that you've listed, attached to any third parties? It sounds like a pessimistic point of view, but that's what happens.
It's not
for some.
pessimistic. I just turn off all third-party stuff if I'm not interested in having my name shared. It's one of those things that as you get more sophisticated with this, you will just see, you always click. If you're absolutely not interested in sharing anything, just keep clicking the no button. Just set all your settings to no, 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 no.
Okay, you answered the question.
Yeah, and the reality is that it's just part of the learning curve of understanding technology and social media, but once you use it and get used to it, it's easier. When I got my first cell phone, that was more than just a phone, it was a smartphone, it was a painful learning curve. And I mean painful and horrible, and I suffered and I whined and I got over it. And then the next one, it was easier, and then the next one, it was easier. And I'm expecting that the next time when I upgrade this, it'll just be like, yeah, okay, whatever. Because now I'm entirely used to it. I'm saying that there is a learning curve, but the curve is worth it. It is worth it to be able to do your job more effectively. It is worth it to be a better advocate. It is worth it to be that much more reachable by the world. Because this is a small conversation, right? We need as many voices as we can being great and sharing information and changing the world. So it is a worthwhile learning curve, and I'm not saying that it isn't there. But I want to thank you for having me. I want to invite you to please link with us online. The best way we can serve you is if you interact with us online and we get to make this a bigger conversation across the state and the world. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.